Hello, welcome to Off the Shelf Reviews.
I'm Jess.
And I'm Gary. And today we're going to review and discuss Slither, which came out in 2006, written and directed by James Gunn.
Well, Gary, do you want to give us the lovely synopsis of this lovely film?
Well, the story follows Starla Grant, played by Elizabeth Banks, a high school teacher in a small town that gets taken over by an alien creature, turning the residents into zombie-like creatures and mutant variations. With the help of Sheriff Bill Pardee, played by Nathan Fillion, they attempt to defeat the alien creature before it's too late. It's time to feed the fear, slug it out, as horror has a new face.
Well, Gary, it was and is an entertaining romp by James Gunn.
Absolutely. I was sold on this film the moment I saw who had written and directed it, and I've become a kind of a lifelong fan of anything that James Gunn has put his name to. And it's awesome now to see him sort of in the directing chair. From here, he would only go on to make excellent movie after excellent movie, and really, in my opinion, gave the Marvel Cinematic Universe that jolt of extra creativity and life that I felt it was
And he
lacking.
brought his cast to the Marvel films. He brings his his ensemble cast.
Absolutely.
With this film, you'll recognise many faces from films you've seen Gunn do in and outside the Marvel universe up to the last couple of years. I mean, you've got people who were in Brightburn, who's in Banks. You've got Michael Rooker, obviously, who everyone loved in Guardians of the Galaxy.
It's Mary Poppins, y'all.
You even got the mayor of the town. He appears in films like as the grandfather of Peter Quill in like the Guardians of the Galaxy film 2, I think, because obviously that's when you can see the flashback. So again, all these actors are just being reused. They're great actors. They all hold. They're just good. It's a great film. It's just a fun. Great film that made no money. So we're kind of spoiling it. We quite like it. You might guess that this is going to be a fairly positive and quick review to some extent, because I think it's hard to not just say awesome sequence, great acting,
True.
And a great punch. I mean, even where there's like horror tropes, he kind of plays off them a little bit left field, that were right field.
Well, I mean, it's definitely a low budget film. They had a budget of I think $15 million, and James Gunn, he had the script. He said he had this idea of a woman trying not to choke as this parasitic worm-like creature forced itself down her throat. And so that was where, his script gestated from that idea. And he shipped it to a couple of studios, and a lot of them were like, we're not sure. I think it was Gold Circle Films and Universal Studios were just like, nope, this is great. Here's your money. You can start when you're ready. And the main caveat, you have total creative freedom and control over the entire project. So that was why James Gunn was like, immediately went there.
Tragically, the film only made about $12 million at the box office.
Yes.
So it was a direct loss. Reviews for it were generally positive. I mean,
I imagine from DVD sales, Blu-ray sales as well. I think the film probably would have got its money back.
It has become a cult classic now. So
I hope
everybody watching, I'm sure, knows of it. And if they don't, spread the word. And
well, in order to also get the financing, they hired Todd Masters to do the creative and practical effects in the film. We've mentioned him before. Absolutely legendary creative effects guy. Worked on the Resurrected, even Star Trek First Contact doing the Borg.
Yeah.
And we see something similar with the parasite here, the kind of hive mind collective creature type thing.
They're CGI throughout. A lot of the slithers are CGI.
Yes.
But they still look pretty good, even though we're talking about a film that's...
I would honestly say the slug creature CGI is terrible.
No.
But it's serviceable.
But
because
they don't overuse it, and when they use it, it's used across like flat surfaces. Like there's a sequence going across a bathroom floor where there isn't leaving a slime trail, but it's more or less okay.
It's serviceable, but it's when you see the worms en masse. But we'll get into that.
Yeah, no, I mean the larger scale CGI scenes don't work. But again, this is the point about aging of CGI. It doesn't age badly, I'd argue. It kind of fits into the slightly... It's a B-movie horror. But it's
exactly,
at a bit more of a bigger scale. Because it is even though $50 million isn't a huge budget by any means for Hollywood, even in 2006, it's still a substantial amount of money, and the polish was there, and it feels like the film as a whole has a great cast.
Yeah.
There's nobody hamming it up. There's nobody phoning it in. There's some larger-than-life characters, but I don't feel that they're out of place. And the whole town which we probably should get into the narrative as a whole.
Yeah, let's start from the beginning. And just like the classic horror movies of an alien invader, we see this asteroid floating through space, crashing into the Earth, and then we're introduced to the comedy sequence as we have Bill Pardy and Wally, his deputy. He's half asleep in his car while his deputy is just rambling on about absolutely nothing.
He's seeing how fast the random birds that are flying around them are going with the...
It just gives you the idea that nothing happens in this quaint little town in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, and it's a quaint, quirky little town because
Yes.
as you get the introduction, it's so Gunn in the sense that the world has some abhorrent, weirdness to it already.
Well, it's the fact that, while he's half asleep and he's looking out the front, we watch the meteorite crash behind them, and they're completely oblivious to it.
Oblivious to the end of the world that's about to happen. It's awesome.
But then we cut to, the town residence itself and our introduction to the mayor, played by Greg Henry, playing Jack McCready. And he's honking his horn and he's yelling at the person in front of him. And he just turns to his left as this woman's like, "Hey, mayor." And he's just like...
And then you realise this total D-bag runs this town, basically. and again, as this whole shot gives you a setup of the town. Grungy, slightly, run-down town.
Yeah.
A really eclectic mix of people living there.
Absolutely.
That are weird, wonderful. Some people with weird, it's like some level of horror because he's got some weird, really strange people they put on screen. And again, that's Gunn. I think Gunn being a little subversive as his nature plays.
Sure.
Get the fuck out of the way, cocksucker!
James Gunn has said that this film has been inspired by so many of the great horror films that have come before it, and already at this point we would have seen just a couple of Easter eggs that he's planted in the film, like R.J. McCready's crematorium or funeral service in the background, which is a nod to The Thing, alluding to the type of creature. And then we cut to the high school, which is Earl Bassett High, which is the name of the character from Tremors, another worm movie. There's a character called Brenda later on who's watching The Toxic Avenger on the television. And later on in the film, there is a barn dance, and you can see that it's Henenlotter's name is written at the top. Fantastic director from Basket Case and Brain Dead. And so, he there's lots of little nods in this film to the things that inspired him.
Yeah, and it's clearly a man who loves the genre, and he goes to town on it. I mean, it really is just a fun-filled horror show because it doesn't really get. I mean, it's not much of a setup, but you kind of then flick between all the main characters and what they're doing, and so you end up at the school with Banks first, and then you cut to have James Gunn and
she's just having a quick chat with Hank, who's played by James Gunn, cameo appearance there. But it kind of gives us the setup because Nathan Fillion's character, he's watching her, and they're ribbing him because she is his high school crush, but she ended up the one who got away. But she fell on hard times, and it suggested that she ended up with Michael Rooker's character because, he was in the right place at the right time, incredibly financially wealthy. And so it's kind of she kind of married him out of necessity rather than love. And one of the most disturbing sequences in the film is the bedroom sequence between Michael Rooker's Grant and Elizabeth Banks' Starla, where it's that kind of trope, that joke, she's not in the mood to have sex with him, but he is incredibly aggressive and persistent, and it is a little bit off when he starts flicking her nipples to try and flick the on switch. But she's kind of repulsed by him. I think in the commentary they joked that she didn't have to do much acting in this scene.
It's a very dark relationship in that kind of
the
way they've set it up at that point.
The marriage feels like it's deteriorating.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we should point out there's a lot of other Easter eggs I remember now that because just prior when she's in the classroom talking to the class that are half slobbering over her because she is beautiful. But you kind of get the points of evolution, and it keeps coming up. It's mentioned it's cockroaches. She talks about then it's crocodiles evolutionary, outlasting everything else. And in the classroom, she herself is talking about various other aspects. It's fun how they're dealing with kind of evolution of the apex predator on the planet, and again foreshadowing this creature from outer space, which
Yeah.
is obviously
which we know has already landed. And while Grant has kind of left his home, kind of gone to the bar to have a drink, and he's
listen to some terrible karaoke.
Yes.
And again, this is where I love this town, because he's drawing just this
the crying game
dystopian
song.
mayhem. Yeah, the crying. It's just so badly sung, and it's magnificent.
I know all there is to know about the crying game.
And like, there's always somebody doing something weird at a table next to him, just eating a pile of nuts and just shells piling up.
Yeah.
And it's just so, I just love
The quirkiness of
the
it.
quirkiness.
Yeah.
The whole film's just full of strange people.
But there's a really good, characterization of Grant here, where he stumbles off into the woods with Brenda. She's carved his name into a heart on a tree. She's just like, I've always loved you. Why have you gone with this other girl when I really love you? And they're about to have sex in the woods, but he's just like, actually, you know what? No, I can't do this. I still love my wife. I'm not going to have an affair. I'm not going to cheat. But that's when they discover the strange alien creature in the woods.
Yeah.
And, it's very reminiscent of the film The Blob, where he grabs a stick and he starts prodding at it before this needle-like thing injects itself at him. And we get the X-ray view as we watch this needle work its way through his body right up into his brain, and we can sort of see something happen there.
God! Dog it!
Grant gets back up and he's got bloodied eyes, bloodied nose, and we're just like, well, Brenda's like worried about him, but he goes home with an insatiable hunger for raw meat. And we get some pretty comedy kind of sketches where he goes into the butcher's and he's just like, 8, no, 10, no, you're not, 12. And we just see him arrive at home with this entire rack, this truck full of meat.
Yeah, it is. Again, the farce of it. Again, it's just a film that's, and then this is what some people said why the film didn't do well, is it was a horror comedy where there hadn't been many horror comedies for a long period. And again, I don't know if I buy that. I think horror has a problem in the sense that finding an audience isn't always easy, because they're not. Very few horror films break massively.
Well, that's the thing. This is the tone that James Gunn set to his actors, was that he's making a funny movie, but he's not making a comedy.
Yeah.
And so that was the kind of tone that let the actors know what they were playing in. And I think it's perfectly pitched as a horror comedy.
Yeah.
Look! Knock this one set clear on over here.
Put that down, numbnuts.
And so now we continue watching Grant's slow transformation when Starla finds him. He's just like, oh, I got stung by a bee, as his face has started to swell and change and alter. And he's also put a padlock on one of the doors, which, of course, Starla's just like, okay, it's a little bit strange, but I'm not going to start questioning it yet. It's only the following day when she calls up the doctor and's like, I'm kind of worried about my husband that you saw yesterday. And the doctor's like, actually, I never even saw your husband. And a bit of trivia here for you. The voice on the phone was that of Rob Zombie. A little cameo there.
Starla, I haven't seen your husband in over a year.
And so that still kind of freaks her out. And it's also at this point we've seen that Grant has these weird tentacle-like things that will protrude from his chest as his skin has started to come up in this horrible rash. He's supposed to go on a date with his wife to the barn dance, but he resists the urge to kind of infect her when she's taking a shower, which is interesting because you're like, is Grant dead? Is Grant completely taken over by the alien? Is the alien now just having Grant's memories? We'll get into that just a little bit later.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions. You can see him sort of wrestling with himself, trying not to hurt the one he loves.
Yeah.
And he also tries to avoid other people as well, I think.
But he still has the incredible hunger and thirst to make a womb now, to impregnate somebody to deliver his young. And so he goes back to Brenda, who is watching The Toxic Avenger. And again, this sequence is a pretty rough sequence to watch in a horror comedy, because it's very rapey. in a way. You know, it's
Well, no,
it's consensual.
She seems up to it.
Well, no,
until
it's
the
consensual
tentacles.
until the tentacles, but then it's just brutal watching her panic as he tries to muffle her screams as he, you know, impregnates her, and we're just watching these like egg-like creatures flow through these tentacles inside her as she's just writhing around on the sofa. It was just like, ah.
Yeah, this film is gross. This is a gross out film.
Yes.
Everything, there's absolutely no holding back, and from this point on, it just gets crazier. And I mean, the effects are cool. The actors deal with it, as we said, in such a way that you feel the peril.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still some slight wisecracking, but it's real subtle. I mean, that they don't ham it up, as I said. Like, there's so many bits we'll get to, but yeah, you get to it in a bit.
So we then cut back to Starla back in her home, and she confronts Grant, who now looks like a monstrous, deformed creature already.
Yeah.
The transformation is well underway, and you know, she questions him, but she's also been worried because the police arrived shortly before to tell her that this woman Brenda has gone missing, which forced her to go and investigate into the house, where she found all of the missing dead pets and animals from the town. Which is, you know, the effects here are incredibly believable. So if you're squirmish about seeing lots of dead cats and dogs, this sequence is bound to upset you ever so slightly.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
She retreats back. You know, she's trying to get hold of the police, and then Grant confronts her and puts her in a headlock. And we can see now that his arm is starting to elongate and stretch around her, and it's a really cool effect. The police barge in. They threaten him, and we watch him run off, kind of with this arm flailing around, knocking over everything as he runs out.
Very Innsmouth, the Innsmouth look.
Yes, very, very. But the film then cuts to 3 days later. And so you're like, well, all kind of things have gone on in those 3 days that we're not aware of. And Bill Party is giving a police briefing saying, this farm's been attacked, this farm's been attacked, and now this farm's been attacked. So now we believe that the Grant monster Squid Man is going to attack this farm next. So they all plan to hunker down and wait the night for Grant's arrival.
There's a posse waiting.
Yeah.
The mayor's furious.
Of course.
The mayor's always furious.
Of course. Starla also convinces Party to take her with him, because how else are they going to bring Grant in alive? And she still, you know, despite her not being, you know, in a loving relationship with him up until that point, she still really cares for him. She still loves him to some degree.
Yeah, there is definitely something, because again, when he comes back, they do make love, sort of, in one, because obviously you get the awkward sequence, but later on you get him kind of kiss her, and they do seem to have affection for moments.
Oh yeah, before he's turned into full Squid Man.
Yeah,
because he's it's the creature that now. Again, I'll get into the creature. Well, we can do the creature bit now if you like.
It's difficult. The thing with this film is really difficult to kind of not spoil things. And again, I suppose the point is, if you haven't seen the film, go watch it right now, because we're going to ruin everything. Because at this point, yeah, the creature itself, you get some exposition later on from one of the survivors, who is a teen girl. You only get, I think you've encountered
She was in the high school.
Yeah, she was in high school, but you then suddenly encounter her halfway through the film, properly, as her family are annihilated. But the big point is the Slithers, the little creatures that are the kind of monster of the movie. Because he obviously, Grant is a monster, but the Slithers are a real horror show as they take control of people. Because they he births them all from Brenda, who desperately wants a possum. And that whole sequence is surreal, because the police have waited. We'll cut to the monster, because I suppose we're jumping back and forth a little bit. But at the siege, they finally find Brenda in a barn house.
Yes.
And
Grant led them there from their stakeout.
Yes.
And Brenda at this point is ready to burst. She's this giant. I mean, James Gunn called it a giant boob, with her head being the nipple. And now it's an awesome practical effect. I think Todd Master said that this is the largest practical prosthetic effect he's ever worked on, or may have ever been put in film. Now, the thing is made up of melted down sex toys. Because it was the best material for a flesh kind of colour and look. And so they literally, all of the sex toys in the area were sold out as they brought all of these products in order to make all of the various effects in the film. Now, yeah, it's that comedy when, you know, the other actors walk in there, or the characters, and they're just like, what's going on here? Would you like to tell us, Brenda? Like, what's happening? And she's asking for the dead possum. She's so hungry. And that is when you're just like, it's disgusting, but it is hilarious.
Handed me a piece of that possum over there. Just a little bit.
But then, sure enough, Brenda starts screaming and hollering in pain as these little fuckers are tearing her apart. And we watch the skin stretch and explode as thousands of CGI Slither slugs roll.
And as I said, this, as much as CGI doesn't hold up, it's still horrifying.
It is horrifying.
And that's the point. I think the CGI finds its base here, where it's like, it's strange, it's silly, it's the first moment where it's gone totally off the deep end.
Yeah.
And from here on out, it's just stranger and stranger.
Well, it also kills off like 3/4 of the cast in one fell swoop.
Well, not entirely kills them.
No, it repossesses them into part of the hive mind.
And it's again, this is where we talk about the monster. It's an alternate zombie.
Yes.
And again, it's the clever usage.
It's the body snatchers.
Yes, but they're all still in there, like Grant is, and Grant's still fighting the demon, as we said. He desires his wife to love him, willingly join the hive, which she ain't up to. So yeah, at this point you end up with the cast, as you say, being slaughtered.
Yeah. Most of the police force get taken out. Bill Party manages to cover Starla's mouth as the slugs writhe all over them, and then they all head out the barn door. And that is when we then cut to various townspeople, like the family in the house. You know,
you start with the girl in the bath.
It's the bathtub. That was the poster for the movie. That was the attraction. Was seeing this beautiful teen girl naked in the bath, and this phallic-like creature between her legs making its way towards her in the bath. And, it's disgusting. It's very reminiscent of Wes Craven's Nightmare on Elm Street with the Freddy glove. It is revolting, and it does latch onto her, and you have this extended...
Well, it's trying to get down her throat, as it said, the Gunn's original concept.
Yes.
And it does... It's horrifying, because you think she's being taken, but then she starts getting flashes.
Yes.
And you realise, he's found a way to do the exposition to explain a little bit of what the monster is, the motive and the means.
Absolutely.
And you see the flashes of other worlds, of various sequences prior in the film that you might not have quite seen clearly, and it starts to give you ideas, but it doesn't answer all the questions at that point.
No.
At that point, she then tries to... she gets away from it. And
she manages to kill it and then burn it with her hair curlers or...
Yeah, something... hair curler. But she kills it, and then it's like, yay! You're like, yay, she's killed one. And then she walks out to try to warn the rest of the family, and there's hundreds swarming her little brother and sister's room. And
her two sisters,
and that's it, famous rule. They've gone for the children, which, I mean, a lot of horror films, don't show the children, but they don't kill the children on screen, I don't think. But
no, I mean,
definitely...
it was scripted that we would see the worms entering the children's mouths, and it was only on the day of filming that James Gunn was like, you know what, actually, the slug-like creatures are too sexualized in their appearance to have this happening to these little girls, so we'll avoid showing that in its entirety.
Yeah, I think he played it safe there.
Yes.
And again, and then her whole family's turned into zombies, and she's trying to escape them.
She hides in the car outside, and it's that freaky image, like the parents are not so freaky, but her two sisters, like with the blood on their mouths and the way their pale skin, they look like tiny vampires, and it's very quite freaky and creepy looking.
It is. It's very good. I mean, that's the whole the body horror, body snatchers. The survivors of the previous encounter then show up to save the day and rescue her, and she's like, "Don't trust them," because he doesn't know the rules of the game yet.
Quite yet.
And then I think I'll be honest, as a story of realism versus the classic comedy horror where nobody quite gets what's going on for far too long, I think they switch on to the game at hand pretty quickly.
Yes. Yeah.
And obviously he's ringing into the station to tell his radio handler to get onto the CDC. We need disease control down here. This is a freaking invasion from another planet. We need to burn this place,
But she quickly gets taken out by the slugs as well.
Because they're all over the city. As they're driving back to the town, you see them creeping up the signs of the town. And it's just, they're screwed. And then she's raiding it back, don't worry, we've got a surprise for you. And they get T-boned by a car slamming into their side.
Yeah, and that's when Starla gets grabbed and taken away back to Monster Grant.
Yeah, Michael Rooker desires his wife.
We watch Bill Party fighting with a zombified deer in the police station. It's one of the worst effects, but it just adds to the silly humor. And of course, it's
and he's saving.
It's Kylie who has to come in and save him. And again, just the it's just brilliant dialogue here, where he's just like, when we tell this story later, it's going to be me who saved you from the zombie deer, not the other way around. And she's like, well, if we survive this.
Yeah, no, but again, it sets up the point where he is playing on tropes of like the damsel in distress, because she was traumatized to sin, but she does, in a sense, play out as a heroine in the, and not to say she survives, but we're spoiling it, so why not? She is one of the survivors, because that whole setup is delivered in the final sequence as they're walking off into the sunset. And that's the thing. This whole film is Gunn through and through. Everything he does is a little subversive. It's not subversive to the point of episode 8, but it's me, forgive my meta references. But it is gently subversive, where your tropes are being slightly turned on their head, and the whole film is. I mean, at the end, I didn't expect it to end the way it ends. The whole film ends a little happier and a bit sillier than I expected.
Well, we've still got the giant gross-out practical effect finale.
Oh, well, yeah, it's an extravaganza, because now you've got literally the whole town is zombified. There are 4 survivors.
Well, unfortunately, our mayor was taken
trapped
after the crash as well, and he tries to escape from the feeding ground, only to then be forcefully injected in the throat, and then we see him hungrily eating and tearing away at an arm. But the thing is, he's weeping as he's doing it. He's just like, I don't want to do this, but I'm so hungry.
I know, and he gets some tragic comeuppance, because he is the disliked character, but the bit prior to that, which we haven't mentioned, which fills in the exposition gap, because it's when you have the 4 of them in the car. That's when I was thinking I just jumped the wrong scene there. You have all 4 of the survivors, should we say, in the car just before they get back to town, and you get the exposition dump from the teenage girl, who's now retelling her flashes of insight she got while the creature tried to meld with her.
Yeah.
And obviously they're arguing about Martians representing all extraterrestrials, and obviously they're having a yelling match in the car about. Again, it's gentle, slightly offbeat humour.
It's a goddamn Martian.
Martians is from Mars, Jack.
Or it's a general term meaning outer space fucker.
No, it isn't.
Look it up, cocksucker.
Enough!
But again, it's giving you that important exposition dump without going into too much detail.
Yeah.
But enough to give you a general consensus of, okay, we now get it. It's trying to take over the world, eat it, and
yeah. I mean, so this entity, this creature, has existed, according to James Gunn, for billions of years, and has destroyed countless amounts of planets. However, according to him, all of the planets this creature has ever come into contact with were filled with animals. Nothing even close to resembling humanity, and that is why this creature has kind of had a bit of it's hit a bit of a stumble here, because it's now in possession, or is now taken over the memories and feelings of a human, which would be its inevitable weakness in this film, because it still can't possess, or it doesn't wish to possess Starla. It has her captive. But the Grant alien creature is, I guess, now lonely. It's now realised that it is alone, and it does want to keep her, but it's conflicted with its emotions of its host body, which kind of makes the creature, it makes the Grant sympathetic, but it also makes the creature that little bit more interesting.
Sorry. I just thought you were trying to kill me.
It is taking on some of the facets of at least its primary host.
Yes.
The rest of the cast are puppets.
Well, according to James Gunn, the moment the parasite first entered Grant's body and went into his brain, Grant dies there. So all of the sequence afterwards, it is the creature just learning about its host body, obviously, having all of those memories of Grant, so that it could play along for as long as it needed to, until it turns into this gross monstrosity that we're seeing, and it is a brilliant effect.
As they burst into the room, he shoots the mayor in the head, who's begging for mercy.
Yeah,
and then obviously
it's the other townspeople falling into it and joining with the mass, like society style.
Yeah, they're just being assimilated, and again, it's gross, and you've got him and the young girl trying to essentially save the day, as it
Yeah.
were.
I mean, we had the setup earlier where one of the deputies was like, hey, look, we've got that grenade that we confiscated all those years ago and we never quite used it. And he's like, well, we'll leave that for now. And of course, he's picked up that grenade. He goes in there, he pulls the pin, ready to throw it. Heroic moment. And the creature tentacle just knocks the grenade away from him.
Yeah, throws him out the window.
No, it goes behind the sofa. And so he's scrambling around to pick up the grenade. He picks up the grenade and then the grenade gets thrown out the window, lands in the swimming pool and just poof.
Yeah, there's a big jet of water. And again, it's just like comedic chaos at this point.
Yeah, because you're like, oh, that was the perfect setup. That's how you destroy the big bad, right?
So yeah, then he's out in the by the pool where he's been thrown, and I've seen the grenade go off, and he's being grabbed and dragged back in.
Yeah, well, the tentacles, one of the tentacles is impaled inside him. He's wrestling with the other one. He ends up stabbing it into a propane tank, and so he's being implanted with eggs. The gas is being sent back to the Michael Rooker monster, and he gets dragged back in through the window, and he tells Starla just to shoot him, and we get a bit of a terrible superimposed explosion, but the guts flying everywhere is just brilliant.
It's a cool sequence, and yeah, at that point you kind of just get the three amigos stagger out of the building at the end of it, which
I just love the line. She's like, well, actually, you need both the tentacles implanted in you in order to be impregnated. And he's like, oh, well, that's all right then, as this white pus is just seeping out of his open wound.
It's gross, but it's wonderful and gross.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's just an extended sequence of them just walking down the road as the credits start to play, just like it's wholly satisfying.
Yeah, and then the credits roll and roll
and roll. Now, there is a post-credit sequence of a kitty cat wandering up to some remains of a creature, and it starts licking at this what looks like an exposed brain. Before we see that needle fade to black, we hear the cat cry.
And again, Gunn was born to make Marvel films apparently because he loves after-credit sequences. But it's
a typical horror trope, though, isn't it? It's the egg that they never found. It's the creature coming back to life one more time.
Well, I'm sure they get back to town and call it, napalm strikes on this town because they can't. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Well, Jess, what were your favourite sequences from the film?
The barn, the possum. That was horrible.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, it is arguably probably the centerpiece moment. Because again, CGI for the time, put that aside, it was the monster birth and all the slithers taking over the town from that point on.
Yes.
And at that point, every zombie sequence after it was fun and weird and wacky, as they were half the people they were, and all they wanted was the meat. It's just wonderful. The whole film is a series of gross-out horror. It's straight to the point. It's the rom-sil of these sorts of films. It does exactly what it says on the tin. It doesn't, and I mean to the extreme that it is. Maybe that's why it didn't work at the broader horror cinema. I don't know if it was too gross out cinema for, I don't know. No, you know what I mean. You know what I mean. This film is a gross out horror where you've got things going down people's throats, people swollen up like the size of a barn, bursting with loads of little slimy tentacle monsters, little girls acting like, I don't know, something out of The Shining, which definitely was where he was referencing as well, actually.
Yeah.
It's a great horror film. There's so many sequences. I'm just trying to think of. I don't know. I like the weird off the beat sequences. Not just horror, but it's the weird karaoke sequence. I just thought it was so quirky and strange that it sets it up emotionally for the strangeness that's about to come. And obviously the bath sequence, because I mean they're the two obvious ones, but they are two of the best sequences. I don't know. You add to that as you will. I mean,
I gotta say, I'm gonna give a big shout out to the special effects. Like one of the first most impressive ones is when they find the Grant monster in his like squid-like form.
Yes.
And he does a tentacle whip, and we just see this cut line emerging on this character, who then literally everything just opens up and everything falls out on the floor. That was a really great effect. The Brenda Barn. Host mother of all of the Slithers, like that witty dialogue, it was just really funny. And then of course her exploding and the Slithers going to town on the townspeople. Great moments. You mentioned the bathtub sequence. It's iconic. It was the poster shot. That really is, quite frightening. She's a very vulnerable teenager in the bath listening to music, and that creature is about to go and do its business. I'd also say for one of the other effects, I just love the mass joining sequence when, and of course Grant's not able to speak,
body horror.
and you've got, we can see all the other people that he's infected are all talking with Grant's voice, and so I found that very intriguing, and it was just very disgusting and really well done.
Again, it's Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yes,
They see them and scream. He said he was inspired by 1,000 different horror films, I guess.
Yes,
and you can see it's just shining through, and he's definitely picking his monster's abilities in a sense that is
he
playing
wanted something
homage
that
to
wasn't
everything.
just one thing. He wanted something to evolve and change throughout the film, so that it kept you guessing and wondering, what was going to happen next. How could things escalate?
You don't know the rules of the game, so when they change, you're going to be caught off foot.
Yeah. Well, Jess, do you recommend Slither?
Yeah. I mean, as anybody who enjoys a horror film, it's a pretty fun lark. As long as you're not too squeamish, as we said, there's a few sequences which are either a little bit too strange interactions between rapey, but otherwise, and again, that's the horror. Horror should be leaving you uncomfortable. That's the Hitchcock. That's the Shining. It's those sorts of films. Any Hitchcockian, it's looking for the things that people are naturally terrified of, and playing on your worst nightmares. And I mean, this film is a real squeamish sort of film at times, and I love it. I love it for it, and it is a great film. And if you enjoy that sort of thing, go for it. I mean, I would sound recommend this to almost anybody. I mean, it is a film that I would say go watch. It's well acted, well directed, well shot. The music and soundtrack was perfectly appropriate. Doesn't jump out at me, but again, it didn't offend me at any point either.
Yeah.
Except the karaoke, but again, that was on purpose. So again, it's fantastically put together piece of filmmaking. And you see why Gunn's gone on to where he's gone on to. He is a master filmmaker, and this is the beginning of his breakout career, I'd say.
Oh, yeah.
Yourself?
Oh, I'm definitely going to be recommending Slither. This is an absolute must-watch for horror fans. James Gunn delivers an action-packed, blood-drenched gore fest with all the dark humour you would expect from his trauma heritage. This really is a top-class B-movie that never fails to delight even on multiple repeat viewings, with its razor-sharp wit, larger-than-life eccentric characters, and a balanced pace. All the actors do a great job and are a joy to watch, but the real standout here for me was Greg Henry, who stole every scene he was in, bringing the comedy and levity after the incredibly gross and nasty sequences. Elizabeth Banks was a great casting choice, and Nathan Fillion shines as the leading man, and it was great to see Michael Rooker in a role that offered him more range. The effects in the film vary in quality, with the CGI slugs en masse looking fairly cheap in a few shots, while the practical effects and makeup are perfectly revolting. Todd Masters and all the effects team did a stellar job bringing the monsters to life. If you've never seen Slither, I implore you to seek this one out. It's hilarious, disgusting, slick and creative, with all the nods back to great horror films that inspired it. And if you have seen Slither, give it another watch. It holds up really well, and this film deserves to be or become a cult classic.
Well, now that is some fucked up shit.
Thanks for watching Off the Shelf Reviews.
Bye-bye.
Well, sometimes I just can't believe you're mine. But every now and then,
It looks like something that fell off my dick during the war.